Okay, no one has joined us on Zoom so far, but that's okay. Yeah, I don't have much to present except a few slides. You might have already seen them, but there are just a few slides about how to write the essay, and there's kind of a very general guide just to clarify the expectations, especially in relation to this very specific type of essay that you may find a little bit different to the other types of essay in other courses. Okay, and then after that, we're going to have plenty of time talking about the projects that we're doing individually. It would be nice that we can actually learn from each other, not only about things that you have found interesting, but also the challenges, the problems, questions, and so on and so forth. So I have tried to summarize the whole process of the so-called guidance into 4 steps. The first step, I think almost everyone, except those who have applied for very lengthy extensions, are into it. I mean, this is the first step that is about, familiarizing ourselves with the topic. I believe everyone has already chosen their topic for the final essay, and doing that annotated bibliography is supposed to be the very first step into the job. I would like you to think of it as a kind of a slow cooking process. Okay, we're not interested in fast food. So it's a slow cooking process, and this is not a type of essay that we just give it out to the very last week or last few days, before the deadline. To be honest, it already started from day one that we started reading, incrementally those quizzes, and then the commentary writing that actually sharpened, or was supposed to sharpen our critical thinking skills, right, about capitalism, but again also extending that into our investigations of the potential alternatives. And some of these alternatives could be embedded into the system and become the seeds of greater changes later, maybe. And some of them, of course, are about replacing the entire system. So I guess that you have, everybody here has found their 2 sources, and possibly still most of you guys are working on your annotated bibliography. If especially you're a week 9er, and the deadline, remember, is this Friday, midnight, 11:59. But I think a presentation, a discussion of the essay would still be very beneficial, because as you know, the annotated bibliography is oriented towards the completion of the essay. Yes, you're familiar with the list of recommended sources. Some of you possibly have found new sources, extra sources from outside the list, and checked with me. So we should be fine. But again, if there is any doubt, please do not hesitate to communicate with me about the sources, about the topic, because I know some topics are a little bit kind of vague, or maybe challenging, or not very clear. Okay. So this process of familiarization it starts with reading, and then writing the annotated bibliography. Yes, please do not hesitate to seek any advice to clarify any confusion. One of the challenges that you might have already detected is that the some of these topics, even I would say every one of those topics, every one of those cases studies, there is no international consensus or agreement. There is no international congress of ecofeminists that would come together every year and issue statements about, here is the definition of ecofeminism, here are the principles of this ideology. And you may say, well, that might be more the case with ecofeminism or those kind of very broad churches, broad ideologies. But even if you think of UBI, right, the universal basic income, there is still no consensus. I mean, how are we going to do it? I mean, where we're going to do it? When we're going to do it? What are the strategies? What are the justifications for it? What are the criticisms? What are the constraints and what are the limitations? How are we going to overcome the limitations, and so on and so forth? So you see that this is kind of the very natural thing, not to have 100% agreement. It's human life, and human beings are very, very much diverse. So it adds to the challenges, but and the complications, but also adds to the exciting aspect of it. And one good thing about the way that the essay question is formulated is that it's formulated around 6 elements, if you may remember. And I mean, regardless of the diversity, of course, you take a sample from the literature, right? We can't really read everything, and hopefully that sample would be, as representative as possible, considering the time frame we have and the capacities that we have. And based on that sample, you just investigate those sources for very specific things, for those 6 elements, right? The principles, the values, the strategies, the arguments for and the arguments against, the examples, the feasibility, how different it is to neoliberalism, and what are the capacities of that to cause meaningful transitions in the system, and so on and so forth. So it's kind of a, you have targets, you have things to look for when you look into the literature. And another advantage of this strategy is that it makes us a little bit independent from understanding everything. Especially many of these resources are written at the much higher level than undergrad for academics, for other academics, and so on. So they're not part of textbooks, unfortunately. And it is normal, it is natural to find lots of things that don't make sense. But finding those 6 elements are possibly they make the job a bit easier, because this part, I don't understand it, but it doesn't seem to be talking about the principles. So I'm not going to spend too much time trying to digest that part of the article or that part of the book. But sometimes, you need to understand, so to understand the rest of it. But again, remember, if there is anything does not make sense, or you're not sure how to understand it, or how to make sense out of it, just email me, or you can ask for a Zoom session, a personal or private Zoom session. We can talk. This is not a course that, I know a good number of people are doing it online, but they also have the opportunity to communicate, use the discussion boards, and so on and so forth. The more you communicate, the more we have the discussion going, the better. Okay. Don't think that this can be just done if especially you feel a little bit the topic or the literature a little bit too difficult to digest. That can be overcome through conversation. Okay. Now, the second step is, of course, now you have, after making ourselves familiar with the topic, now we want to expand the field, and that possibly happens after you submit your annotated bibliography, or maybe even in the process of writing annotation. You have found your two sources and you are annotating them at the moment, but you also have found a few more, maybe out of the recommended resources, the list of recommended resources, or through the library website or databases. Whatever you have found can be a base for further investigation, for expanding the scope of your search, your research. So critically evaluate, find the keywords that appear in those sources that you have annotated, you're annotating, or you have used to make yourself familiar with the topic. And those keywords can be used in the process of finding more resources. Our library databases, especially the library search engine, should be good enough. Most of the ones, the resources that are listed in the extended course outline, they have been already used by the students previously, and I think you should be fine. You can just copy and paste the title of the ones that interest you initially into the search engine of the library website. And if you struggle with finding the full text, just email me. Just drop a line, Mohammed, I'm struggling with this one. Can you help me find the full text? I should be able to help you in 98% of the cases. Okay, and Google Scholar, yes, that's another good source. I sometimes myself use that. And sometimes I find things through the Google Scholar that I can't find on our website, the library website. But then when I copy and paste the title into the library website, then I can find it and download the full text. But again, if that's difficult or impossible, let me know. Do not trust ChatGPT, okay? It's in most cases, it gives you the wrong resources. Chat with me, not the ChatGPT, okay? Another problem with Google Scholar, again, it used to, I'm not sure if that's the case, but it has its own algorithm. So the sources that have been seen more often than the others come first. So, and the older sources, of course, have had the chance to be read by more frequently, to be discovered more frequently. So they come normally first. Based on my experience, this search engines are kind of also tuned to the personal preferences in somehow. So that could be a different type of experience for you guys. But anyway, in my case, the first pages are full of older sources, so I have to go to the next pages of the Google Scholar or even Google. But one thing that you can do is that you can go and adjust the time frame of the search. So when you adjust, I normally do that. I limit it to, let's say, 2019 to 23. Last 4 or 5 years. And this way I make sure that I will find newer resources. Look at the abstracts of the articles or book chapters. Even today, book chapters have abstracts. That's kind of one of the requirements of the publishers. Even if the abstract does not appear inside the book, edited book, still the website is supposed to provide people with an abstract of the book chapter. So anyway, have a look at the abstracts. That's in a kind of an entry point into a resource. A lot of times I find the titles kind of misleading. They want to make the titles look attractive or or attract more attentions, and the title is far more general than the topic, than the arguments inside, which is a kind of a disappointing. But abstracts are much better than titles to give us an idea about the content. And you know, again, use your critical evaluative skills that you have already developed. Look into that. Ask yourself, okay, by reading that abstract, is this really corresponding to what I'm going to do? Again, do not let the earlier readings of the literature distract you. There could be very interesting things that are not very much related to the essay question. Remember, try to internalize, you know, indoctrinate yourself with those 6 elements. You know, have them written somewhere next to your laptop or on the desk somewhere. And okay, well, does this article or book chapter or a book, correspond to at least maybe 1 or 2 elements? That would be enough. You know, that would be good enough to make sure that some of those elements are going to be addressed through reading this or that that source. Pay attention to the examples, cases, the context where the study is done, and see how you can relate that to the essay question, how you can relate that to those six little questions, 6 elements, 6 components of the essay question. Another way of expanding the search is to not only using the search engines. Okay, we have Jack with us on the Zoom. Can you hear us, Jack?
Yeah, the audio is all good on my end.
Yeah, okay. I sometimes walk away a little bit from the desk, so I hope my voice wouldn't be affected. But let us know if there is a problem with the voice, with the sound, and also feel free to interrupt, okay? Because I may not be able to check the chat box. If you have any questions or any comments. Okay, now another way of expanding the scope is, of course, by looking into the list of references. So if you find a couple of very interesting, highly relevant sources, so that it's very likely that the sources that are referenced in those sources are also very relevant. The problem is that the ones that are referenced in your source have been published earlier. So they might be a little bit older, but that's not the problem if the source you're using, the original one, is not that old. Some publishers also provide us with the list of sources that use the source you found, okay, even if they have published later. Or sometimes they provide you, after you download, you press the button and you download it, you see that a window opens up with a list of related or relevant sources, or the ones that have been also downloaded by the people who downloaded the one you downloaded. So this kind of, I would maybe we can call it a snowballing, maybe. So it is kind of a snowball strategy, could be a way forward. And then finally in your essay, you start utilizing the sources. Yes, you can. I've been asked about this multiple times. Of course, you can use the sources that you have annotated in your annotated bibliography. You can use them in your essay, definitely. The difference is that in your annotated bibliography, you are making an argument about how useful and how relevant the 2 sources are. Well, that's not the case anymore. In the essay, you directly utilize, you directly draw on the content of those annotated resources. Everything is clear. Is there any questions to this point? Does this correspond to what you have so far been doing? Okay, is it kind of similar to what you do in other courses? Yeah, okay, good. Now, here I'm trying to use a very kind of challenging example. I'm not sure if anyone is doing anything on this one. Are you doing anyone studying green localism or something like that? You're doing that. Oh, okay. Yes, that was a few years ago. A few people were interested in that. So it became kind of a challenge. So I said, let's see what we can do with that. Because one of the books that I shared online on Blackboard those days was Babylon and Beyond, which you also have you have access to that book, which is a very interesting book. It has a few chapters. Have you seen that book? Yeah, that has a very interesting chapter on that. And actually that book in that chapter made some people interested. The title of the chapter is Green Localism, which has been around for quite a while. I think since the 60s maybe, when the very famous book Small is Beautiful was published by Schumacher. Well, it was the 60s, 70s, and the demise of the working class movements and so on and so forth. The working class was already middle class, and this Small is Beautiful attracted a lot of interest, and it still attracts a lot of interest. There's still a lot of alternative seeking initiatives are very much consciously or subconsciously align themselves with this idea. So anyway, so when we search for the word green localism in the literature, through the databases, we found very little. And then we realized that, okay, there are other words used, other keywords have been used to refer to this phenomenon. Remember, again, as I said, because there is no consensus, sometimes you see that multiple, different names have been used to refer to almost the same thing, a phenomenon like this, an alternative like this. Sometimes strangely, you see that almost the same word has been used to refer to multiple things, different things. Now, in this case, green localism is not the only name for this alternative. In the case of solidarity economy, you see that the word solidarity economy has been used, but it's been used to refer to quite different things. For instance, solidarity economy has sometimes been equated with social economy, and this is mostly related to credit unions and cooperatives and things like that. Things that socialize enterprise. You may say NRMA is a socialized enterprise or something like that. But they're not really radical alternatives. But part of the literature, when they use solidarity economy, they mean something radically different. So we have to be careful. If you're interested in solidarity economy, you have to differentiate between social solidarity economy, I guess in some cases, with the radical one. In this case, we have to be careful and try to find alternative names for that. So not only green localism, but also eco-localism. Sometimes with a dash or a hyphen, sometimes without a dash. Eco-localization, sometimes with a dash, sometimes without a dash. Eco-localization with S, eco-localization with Z, depending on the if that's American or British or whatever. That's one thing. So there are strategies that I have listed here to make sure that we find them. That is called, the wild card. The librarians call it wild card strategy, I guess. If I'm not mistaken, if you click on that link, wildcard, it gives you a number of strategies to find resources. But if your guys are doing, I don't know, degrowth or eco-socialism, you should be fine. Again, even with eco-socialism, be careful. Sometimes you have to put a dash or remove the dash. So you won't miss anything. Okay, and yes, and another thing that we can do, again, after consulting the very first few sources we found on green localism. Okay, before I forget, eco-anarchism, right? It could also be, some people refer to it by using the word green anarchism. That's also another. So eco could also be replaced with green when you do the search. So anyway, after consulting the very first few sources we found, we realized that, oh, okay, there are some interesting examples already on the ground, people doing, and they all correspond to this idea of small is beautiful, like the transition towns. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not. Eco villages. A few people have done some very good essays on eco villages, and also the concept of permaculture, which is again is kind of localist, but it has a network of the projects. So yeah, you can also search for these things. You don't really need to just limit yourself to green localism or eco-localism or green localization or eco-localization or environmentalist localization or environmentalist localism, and so on and so forth. Yeah, that asterisk is a savior. So if you use it, that means that whatever comes after the word. So you can use that with the eco-localist and then put the asterisk to cover localism, or maybe even localization with S, or localist. So that covers everything, every potential word that come, or letters that come after that. And yes, you can see, have a look at these examples that I have put. Most of the search engines are sensitive enough to bring us both the American and the British spelling. But if you're not sure, I would say a question mark in the middle in most cases would work. Okay, after doing these tricks, okay, we found a few interesting things. For instance, handbooks are very good sources, because handbooks are not like the research articles. They're not very much into empirical case studies. They normally, the concept of handbook, although sometimes it's violated, but the concept of handbook is to provide people with the most recent advancements in the literature on the topic. Okay, so in this case, for instance, the Routledge companions are like handbooks as well. The Routledge Companion to Alternative Organization. The title doesn't seem to have much with the alternatives to capitalism. You think it must be about organizational studies and things like that. But it had a very interesting, or it has a very interesting chapter on eco-localism. Not green localism, eco-localism, which is the same. Okay. Again, when we search for eco-localization, we came across with this one, which is, if you look at the title of it, it's about peak oil and climate change. And you think, oh, what is this going to have with eco-localism or eco-localization? Well, it's in the title, but because the main subject is peak oil, it has a very interesting short section to where the author defines eco-localization. And that should be enough. If you don't want to cover the peak oil, don't bring peak oil issue into your essay, because your essay is not about peak oil. it's about ecolocalization, but that little part, that little section, would be good enough to be used in your essay. Any questions? Have you started searching, expanding the scope of your search beyond those two sources? Are you finding it difficult or easy? Not too difficult, not too easy?
I started having a little bit of a look for expert degrowth sources.
Okay.
And I did not a huge look, but I did find that because there's a lot of really, so I've narrowed my search like for the past 3 or 5 years using the library website. I found that there's a lot of literature on it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's quite specific.
Yeah.
So from memory, I found a lot was about degrowth and urban planning.
Yes.
Seems to be a really popular topic, and I was like, I just sort of got to the stage where I was like, yeah, I really need to introduce extra keywords to refine my searches a bit. Probably, I still need to make myself a bit more familiar with the existing literature, so I'm going to like go through the recommended sources, and I think by the time I'm like make myself familiar, and by the time I'm done with them, I should have an idea of what I need, what specific areas I need in the essay, and start introducing keywords so that I can find sources more relevant to those topics.
Yeah. Okay, that's something good. That's a good insight. A lot of things are highly specialized on degrowth, or it could also be the case with other alternatives. One thing that we can do initially, and remember that we are discussing these alternatives in relation to capitalism and / neoliberalism. If you want to mix your keyword with some other keywords to avoid those highly specialized, sources, you can combine the name of the alternative with capitalism. Again, capital I and then asterisk. So that would cover capitalism, or maybe even capital asterisk. So sometimes we refer to capitalism by using the word capital. Mix it up with capitalism. Especially you can do that with the UBI, because then this is more, it will make it even make it more possible to find sources that are more relevant to the essay. Or you can mix it with neoliberalism and search. And again, be careful with the dash. Some people use neo-liberalism. Some people now they have got rid of the dash, so it's neoliberalism. Another term that you can use is Marx asterisk. That would also include Marxism, because many Marxists are also very much critical of many of these alternatives. They see them as not still up to the job of replacing capitalism. So they normally give us some good insight. If you want to go a little bit too radical or too critical, that can also be a way forward. For instance, UBI capitalism, UBI neoliberalism, UBI Marxism or Marx. So that might also be useful. Thanks for bringing that up. Anyone else? Any problem with finding resources or group?
I'm also doing research, and I found a lot of stuff that, because it was such a broad framework that needs implementation with it's like transition. So I guess what I wanted to know was, within the essay, should I then be thoroughly kind of research into another to discuss how we incorporate to bolster the growth?
Yes, that's another good point. If you remember towards the end of and we're going to do that with actually after watching something on YouTube today. one of the things that we wanted to do towards the end of the essay is to say, how would this benefit from being aligned with other alternatives? But if you remember, we hesitated to deepen that because that means that you have to bring another alternative into a very full, deep discussion. But in a number of cases, for instance, in the case of degrowth, the literature already in many places acknowledges that how this, for instance, benefits from becoming more sensitive towards the impossibility of being a degrowther in the context of neoliberalism, a degrowther in the context of capitalism. Therefore, they may, for instance, run that argument that it will be beneficial, a much more beneficial thing, for instance, for UBI if it is exercised in a social democracy. So that this way you can relate it to social democracy without getting, deeply into a discussion of how these two things can be married together, right? So you can say, okay, well, there are also part of the argument, part of the literature, or it could be your personal reflection. Well, considering that these are the characteristics of this alternative, considering that these are the limitations of this alternative may benefit from being also mixed up or put in place in the context of Green New Deal, for instance, in the case of UBI, or be complemented with full employment, because we humans are not just want to be relieved from being overburdened with bad jobs, the bullshit jobs, as David Graeber says. But we also want to have the opportunities to be involved in. So we would like to have, a kind of full employment opportunity. So it's in the case of degrowth, for instance, many people would like it to radicalize it by injecting a little bit of more maybe Marxism into it, or communism into it. Or they may argue that it would perhaps work better if we go for green localism. But we don't want to get into the details of that. As far as you show that awareness and provide us with a bit of a justification for that, why you think this would benefit from being linked or aligned with other alternatives, or to be placed in a different context. It makes a significant difference if you, for instance, do UBI in the context of a social democratic society, like Finland, versus in an American context, which is an Anglo neoliberal aggressive, capitalism. So that's why Milton Friedman was happy with the idea of UBI. It's just a sort of cash out. He called it negative tax, right? Because he was against taxation. And yeah, we will discuss that later. But I hope I answered your question, right? Just not too deep, not too extensive. And if you look at some of these, the two articles that we have already published, two essays that we have already published on the Commonwealth's website. You've got the link to that if you go to the modules, and then you go the assignment below the final assignment. There's another module that connects you to those two published essays. You'll see that in the case of Claire, she wrote something about the essay was about degrowth. Towards the end, I think she makes that case, if I remember correctly. Yes, but that would be the subject of another essay. How these connections or amalgamations or combinations may happen. Okay, how about you, Jack? Would you like to say something?
Sorry, my mic was playing up. No, I think that just about covers it. I've been looking probably towards environmentalism or eco-localism for what I'm going to choose for my week 9, but I'm not entirely set in one yet.
Okay, and the due date is this Friday. I hope you can catch up, right? Or let me know if you need time or something. Yeah.
No problem. Thanks. I've just been wrangling a lot of other assignments recently.
Okay. But as soon as you find the two sources, I think it shouldn't be too difficult to just simply annotate them and put them into that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I acknowledge it's not that as easy as the other ones. But we have already faced the challenges, and we have tried to find. So I believe I must have also listed some of the things that we have found on eco-localism or green localism inside the extended course outline. And again, thanks to you, Georgia, that you raised the issue with the sources on degrowth, because they were pretty old. I acknowledge that. So you might have seen me posting some new sources on the discussion board. Did you see them? Yeah, please subscribe to those, and so you won't miss. Subscribe to all the forums. So I found a few newer ones. Possibly they are the same as the ones that you, Georgia, might have already found. But yeah, they were very interesting. I mean, one of them, I think, if I remember correctly, or am I mixing it up with eco-socialism? But anyway, one of them has examples of degrowth already on the ground. So a lot of these, transition plan, eco-villages, the literature may not directly relate them to the broader ideology. A lot of movements on the ground by women that are defending their rights and also their ecological rights. In the case of, for instance, India, Africa, a lot of them can be considered as examples of ecofeminism. A lot of examples can be found that are not consciously considered or brand themselves or label themselves as eco-socialists. It's not coming to say we're a group of ecofeminists defending, our rights here against Monsanto or things like that. But you can consider them as examples, good examples of ecofeminism, or good examples of degrowth, or good examples. So one of those books, edited collection, I think it had a number of examples that could be related to degrowth. I mean, I didn't look into that, but just judging based on the titles of the chapters. Okay. And the third step, yes, now use the skills that you have developed through this, commentary writing, the annotated bibliography, of course. And I hope that this process of annotation have made us obsessed with the 6 elements, right? That's a good obsession. And if you haven't watched, or if you have missed some of those lectorials, especially week 6, when we discussed Rogers and Harcourt and their arguments that the alternatives are not things and they are processes to make and remake, and we have to be critically reflective on that. I think that's very essential to carry that skill, critical thinking skills, into the essay. Yeah, and if you may remember, in week 8 and week 9, we discussed some of those alternatives. We watched some interesting YouTubes, and we tried to discover those elements even in those YouTube presentations. Okay. So read your sources carefully while focusing on the 6 elements of the research question. Number 2, take notes of anything from your sources that relates to any of those elements. So you can say, okay, I'm going to read this article that I have printed out or saved in my laptop, and I'm going to take notes of anything that has anything to do with any one of those alternatives, or alternative. Okay, and /or. Alternatively, you can say, okay, I have a few things already collected. I'm going to look into each one of them and see where they talk about the principle of this, and take note of that. You can use both the strategies or just one strategy. It depends on you. I mean, I can't really dictate which way works better. In most of the cases, maybe a mixture of both. Yeah, begin answering the research question, through the 6 elements, using your notes, the notes that you take. Just don't pile up the notes. And I know that, and I say that every year, and I don't do it myself. So last year, when I, in the middle of the year, when I started the project of writing that book, I almost wasted 2 months for just reading because I didn't feel confident enough, So I just kept reading, oh, that's interesting. I just kept reading and thinking. And then after 2 months, I ended up with a huge pile of notes. And that became another, kind of a burden. I had to go through those notes again and read them again. And then I asked myself, why I even start writing from the first place? So that's why I put this as soon as possible. Just write. It's the trick. Let your writing guide your reading. Okay, and it's magic. And so just maybe you copy and paste those 6 questions in a blank page, which is going to become your essay, and just try to answer them. You have read a couple of articles, or maybe the Wikipedia. Maybe I don't know, but we're not supposed to use it anyway. So you have read something, and then you start answering those questions. Or even if you haven't had time to read those things, even if you haven't done your annotated bibliography. So just try to answer those questions yourself, with guesswork. Well, I'm writing something about UBI, so that's the topic. The first question is, what are the values or principles or whatever? Okay, what would be the principles behind UBI? Social justice, providing people a redistribution of resources. What is the strategy? I guess it's about giving everybody a handout. It's universal, so everybody should receive some money. So just put it there. Just put it there, because you have something to rework. You have something to work on. Don't hesitate to write. Trust yourself. Have confidence. And someone should constantly say that to me myself, because I know it's a little bit difficult. This procrastination issue. That we don't have the confidence. It always starts with action, not motivation. And you would just wait, try to read until one day you develop the motivation to write because you know enough. It's not going to come in most cases. Just start with action, then motivation comes. It's like a chicken and egg. Action, motivation. But it starts with action. Even if you know nothing, you just put a joke. You put a joke. I'm serious. Just put a joke there, and then you can just start, removing the joke and replacing it with other things, better things. Just put a joke. That's I sometimes, to make sure that this would stay with you, I refer to this example. It works like arranged marriage. You start living with someone, and then the love comes later, unfortunately. By the way, did you know that arranged marriages have a much higher chance of being successful? So again, I'm joking, of course. But yes, this works better if you do the action. Okay. Ensure to reference your sources by citing the page numbers. Yeah, that's also, remember that we're now into a much more serious job of writing an academic essay. And it's not commentary writing that we relax the standards about referencing. It's not, annotation that we can relax. So we have to be very careful. And page numbers are need to be mentioned when you tell me when we are supposed to mention the page numbers. Direct quote. Yes, direct quote, which I don't recommend. Direct quotes when you, for instance, something is mentioned in a very specific way, or some figures are mentioned. So yeah, you do that. But try to paraphrase as much as you can. Try to make this word your ideas. So when someone reads, and the examiner reads, and you read your essay, say, okay, this is you talking through the literature. not literature being just cut and paste into that. So it's try to avoid direct quotation unless it is very necessary, unless you want to reflect. Chomsky said that, but I disagree. And so of course you have to say what Chomsky said, and you have to put it on quotation, between quotation marks. There is another place where we need to do the pages reference. Page numbers. When you refer to a very specific part of an argument, not the entire argument, you want to make sure that the reader will be able to find that part. Okay, or as I said, some figures, even if those figures are not put into quotation marks. So in that case, yes. If you mention that an argument that is very much general all across the source, yeah, we don't need to do that. But if it's concentrated on a few pages or one page in that source, it's better to mention the page number.
Can I just ask a question? If you're using the sources,
yeah.
If you're using the sources from your annotated bibliography, can you just quote it verbatim, or do you have to reword it? When you're not quoting it, you say I put slabs of the annotated bibliography in the reference, in the essay. Does it have to be reworded?
I doubt you will do, because the way that you formulate the annotation is different to the essay. In annotation, you say this author says, and this author's arguments, or this author covers this and this aspect of the alternative. You're kind of reflecting on that. Whereas in the essay, it's very much embedded. The content is embedded into, much more directly embedded into the essay. So even if you're cutting and you think there's a few sentences that can be there, yeah, I don't mind. I mean, you can just rephrase it, move a few words around. It shouldn't be too difficult. But I doubt you would replicate that, because as I said, the annotation is about the source, whereas this is about the alternative.
Yeah.
Right. But I see what you say. I mean, it's also possible to find some sentences useful. Okay. Yes. I've covered that. Any questions? Any more questions? Please let me know. All good? Okay, now the fourth step, as I said, I think I've already said that. Write. The motivation doesn't come first. It's always action. So then, yes, to be able to answer the question more effectively, you need to have a clear and critical understanding of key arguments about the case. Start your introduction. Yeah, I would talk about how to structure the essay next week. But I couldn't help but to say something about the introduction. Normally, introduction is written or rewritten or completed as the very last thing, ironically, because you have made yourself already familiar with the topic, and then you have written the essay. Now you are in a much stronger position to write the introduction. But how to write the introduction, it's not really too challenging, not too difficult. You introduce yourself to someone, this is my name, I live there, I come from, someplace, and so on and so forth. The introduction should introduce the essay to the reader. What is this essay about? What are the objectives of this essay? And of course, the very obvious objective of the essay is to answer that research question. But remember, that research question is formulated, the way it's formulated is very general in the extended course outline. You have already chosen your topic, so you can reformulate that essay question, narrow it down to your very specific alternative and reformulate that essay question as the objective of your research. Well, this essay is about investigating the the characteristics, the features, and the difficulties and the strategies, the capacities of this UBI as an alternative, and so on and so forth. Or there has been, or you can make it more creative. There has been a growing awareness about the crisis of the current economic system. That would even work better. And there have been efforts in order to fix the problems, the crisis, addressing crisis. Among them are strong arguments, recently developed through many circles of activists and intellectuals and even politicians about the universal basic income as a way forward. However, universal basic income has remained a kind of a controversial issue, and we would like to, this essay would like aims to address those issues. And finally, examine the capacity of the UBI to address the issues, the problems, the crisis that is that is supposed to address. So you can make it more creative, and then briefly explain why it is important to study this alternative. I think we made that case because of the crisis, because there have been efforts in order to push for that argument, to push for that alternative as a solution, and so on and so forth. And outline also, as part of maybe the last part of the introduction, outline the structure of the essay. Why that is important? Very briefly again, remember when you go to the museum, where would we go first? You just randomly visit every part of that, or you just go to the information desk, ask for the map, and then so you say, okay, this museum is structured this way, so I have to start from this, room number this, or section number what. And so you that works like a guidance. So you can say, well, this in the first section, this essay addresses this and this. In the second section, we move on to discuss this and this, and then finally, this is what we're going to say. So a little bit of outlining there, and then in the body. So develop the critical argument in your essay. Instead of simply reproducing the existing studies of the case, you may use reliable primary sources. Oh, that's also something I think I have mentioned a couple of times so far. Yeah, remember that the minimum number of the academic sources we want to use is 8. So if you do that, that's fine. Then beyond that, you can use non-academic but relevant sources. You may remember a lot of these alternatives have their own proponents, and those proponents, advocates, have their own websites, and they're very much involved in the debates around their favorite alternative. For instance, legal authors have very interesting websites, for instance, eco-socialists, and so on and so forth. So you can, on the top of that, I have met the minimum requirement of covering 8 sources, academic sources. On the top of that, you can actually use those websites. You can draw on those websites as your primary sources of information. For instance, you see in the literature, there's a bit of a criticism, or maybe more than a bit, of, let's say, degrowth or UBI, or full employment or whatever. But you see that there's not much in defense or responses to those criticisms in the literature, because the literature is normally 5-10 years behind the reality, unfortunately. Because until your paper or book is published, a few years are passed through those peer reviews. So a lot of those websites can also give you very good and fresh insights about the most recent responses to the criticism that these activists normally receive. So yeah, why not? I don't mind if you want to use them. Make sure that they are also reference, and referencing them is a little bit weird, I know. Sometimes, in most cases, you don't have the name of the author, the year of the publication. You may just put a footnote and put the link to that. let's say the website, degrowth, search for degrowth, whatever is the name of the website, and then you put a footnote or an end note, and there you can just simply put the link to that website. I wouldn't put those links inside the text because that makes the text, it's like broken. It's in the middle of the text, you see a very long link or something like that. Maybe as a footnote. But there are also ways of referencing them properly. If, for instance, the name of the author, the name of the organization can be mentioned as the author. The year of publication in most cases can be found. I know that this from my daughter because they taught them in high school how to reference websites. There is another website that you can just put the link of the website you want to reference, and it creates a reference for you. So that could be also a good way of a proper way of referencing your website. I think I would admire that more than just simply putting a link. And then then finally towards the end, it's your reflections. We would like to see you. What do you think of it? And I don't mind if you want to use the first person, but I know many of us hesitate to use the first person. So you can use tricks like this. One can argue, or we can conclude, or something like that. One may conclude, or one may infer, something like that. So to avoid the first person, if you think that would make it too informal. But anyway, the purpose is towards the end. Where are you? Where is your position? What do you think of what the old book you have learned about this alternative? Do you think this is going to make significant changes or meaningful changes in what ways? And so on and so forth. So the sixth element, last element could be answering that could be your conclusion. Have a look at those samples, the published essays, and see how they have formulated, especially Claire's work was a very good one. Okay, I'm done. Okay, the next, we can now perhaps learn from you, if you don't mind. Yeah, this is the case study description. I should have put the links to I'll do it later today. But if you want to find those two published essays. Yes, this is assignment number 4, case study, and then past exemplary essays. I hope the link is not. Yeah, these are the 2 essays, if you may remember. That was too old. This is too old. This is when we were asking people to criticize capitalism for first half of the essay and then talk about the alternative in the second. But now we allocated the entire essay to the alternatives. We do the criticism of capitalism in the first half of the semester. So yeah, I think these 2, universal basic income and degrowth, are good examples that you can look at that. Since the literature has grown fast and massively, so I don't think sharing these essays would compromise your ability to write your own, because there's a lot of other sources that are not covered in these essays, or you may cover some of them that are covered in these essays, but you write it from your essay from your own point of view. You may develop a different position, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Anyone wants to talk about what you are doing, what you've been doing so far? Anything interesting you found? Any challenges? Anything you would like to share with others? Remember, we're not competing with each other. It's quite possible that many people will get very good marks, especially we share our experiences with each other, and I don't mind. So you getting someone getting PhD doesn't make it impossible for you to get your PhD. Or people or whatever. Okay.
Are the two issues, those essays have graphics in them? Are we expected to put graphics in the essay?
Not expected, but if you think we came across with a graphic, okay, some graphics are they're not publishing that. Yeah, if you find a graphic that is useful, you can put it basically in the essay. But remember, if you finally end up publishing it, you need publishing your essay in case you're interested. By the way, if you receive 82 plus, which is B plus, or HD, consider that as an invitation from me to get your work published. It shouldn't be too difficult, because if you have received 82 plus, that means the feedback you're receiving is not asking you to make major changes.
Yeah.
So it just maybe a few hours of revising and then submitting it to me. And like Claire and Kiana, so you can actually
So you
share
can-
your work.
You can put graphics at this stage or.
At this stage, but not
All
when you publish. But you're not expected to have the graphics.
Okay.
That's not an expectation.
And the other question is, I've been grappling a bit with the essay. So I'm doing UBI. So I believe in UBI. So do I tailor my essay like that? In other words, it's a positive essay for UBI and limit the criticisms.
Remember, yeah, I
I
have
have to
this,
do it totally
Yeah.
objective.
yes, I have this dilemma with people, who are kind of very much ideologically attached to an alternative.
Yeah.
And they would like to use this opportunity to explore their favorite alternative and understand it better.
Yes,
But remember that one of the very critical aspects of this course is to develop critical thinking skills.
okay,
But critical thinking skills, think of it like this, what is your relationship with your children? Your children are very much loved, right?
Yes.
Our children, right? But what is our relationship with them? I'm not going to say, okay, whatever you do, you don't want to study, you don't want to say, you want to waste your time, you want to eat junks. It's okay. I love you. Whatever you do, I love you. No, you're not going to do that. You're killing them.
they put boundaries in.
Yeah, right. So if I have this kind of relationship with your favorite alternative, are you going to say whatever UBI said is going to take us to the heavens? That's not going to happen, right? So you're killing UBI. You're killing your UBI. You're not doing a service to that. And we have these problems before as well. There were people who were very much attached to anarchism, for instance, or Marxism. And their relationship with that alternative is fine. I mean, it's in kind of a love relationship. But what kind of love relationship is that when we just switch up on?
Yeah.
So criticism does not mean debunking something. Criticism means constructively helping that thing understand. Remember Rogers?
Yeah.
Rogers was in favor of socialism. Rogers was in Harcourt was in favor of feminism or place-based alternatives. She was in favor of the indigenous movements. But they all tried to be critically reflective, especially in the case of Rogers,
I
right?
get it now.
Rogers
Yeah.
wanted to say, well, you guys are doing very good job, but if you ignore this and this and this, if we don't address our problems, we're going to end up, repeating the mistakes of the past.
Yeah.
So, yeah, think of your alternative as your
And the
child.
other thing is, who knows, you might find more criticism become to a negative conclusion.
Yes,
Yeah.
I mean, are we supposed to be wedded to an alternative for the rest of our lives? These alternatives are there to serve us, not us serving them. So if I finally find myself, through this critical constructive criticism, finally ending up in kind of, I initially had a very positive, but now I have some serious doubt. that actually puts us in a different path, a different journey to find something even better. And well, we accept that, you're beyond, we accept anarchism, but maybe there are something better than that. Okay. That was a $1 million question. Well done, thanks. Anyone else, please? Yeah.
So I was having a look at the marking rubric for the essay, and I noticed that this one has marks. There's marks for writing, for titling. That's something I haven't done before. Do you have any advice on on writing a good title, and at what point of the essay we should do that? Because one of my other courses, it wasn't required, but he suggested it just as a way of keeping your sort of like contention, your point of contention when writing the essay in mind. Like your title should sort of reflect like something that, like, if you look at that, you should be thinking like, is what I'm writing like relevant to the title of my essay?
Yes, I think that's a very good. I've never been thinking of what would be the best way of developing the title. It normally naturally comes, and I normally struggle, and then I end up having multiple titles, and then I send it to my friends and say, which one you think is the one? But those friends haven't read the work, so
yeah. I know, like, when you think of titles, you often think of things that's like more from almost a marketing perspective, like you want something that's going to draw a reader's interest. But like, because this is very academic, like, is the title supposed to be more like less about drawing someone into it and less about drawing someone in and more about like providing almost like a one sentence, like almost boiling down an abstract to one sentence so that you're actually giving a proper description instead of almost like clickbait, kind of drawing someone in with what and almost misrepresenting what you're saying.
Yeah, I see the dilemma. I don't have the final answer to that, but I would say, as far as the title is representative of the content and it's a little bit creative, that should be fine. And look at these titles. Actually, when you were talking about the degrowth, the challenges of realizing a utopian necessity. That's nice, isn't it? Oh, the other one, universal basic income, a standalone alternative or a step in the right direction to a post-capitalism. You see that's both of them are beautifully done. They represent what they say, because they're not. They both show that they are critically reflecting on it. They both show that they're not just blindly wedded to it. They both titles show that they acknowledge the positive things in them, and they both show that they could be something beyond that. I think both titles are nice. Something like this, I would say, that would be my answer to it. Okay, but that was a very good question. Yeah, titles. Why I put that as the assessment criteria? I mean, can you imagine yourself without a name, a proper name?
I think it's something that like furthering your academic career, like titling becomes more and more important. Like in undergrad, like titling is not something that's necessarily important, but if you want to go into postgrad, you're going to be expected to start doing titles for your work, and the earlier you sort of start doing that, but that like it seems really intimidating when you're first at the start. So once you've done it a couple times, like you get a bit better at it.
Yes, yeah. And remember, you always remember that you guys are in the second year, so expectations are not that you guys something. But I mean, this is a skill we would like to develop, as you said. But even before we get to it, we may never get to the postgraduate. But still, I think it's important to be able to find a name for our child, the essay. Okay.
I had a question about specifically the start of the essay questions. Is that going to be critical exam? But then in the 6.
Oh, I crossed that. I forgot to cross that.
So do we?
Yes, I have relaxed that. Please, again, I should possibly correct that. Thanks for picking up the problem topics. You don't need to use that, in an explicit way. You don't need to be communist in an explicit way. And remember, communism is not an ideology. So it's just a framework, it's just a way to say, well, again, getting back to your question, earlier question, that this cannot be a standalone alternative, maybe benefits from being interrelated with other alternatives or put into the proper context and things like that. As far as towards the end of the conclusion, you address the limits and how in what ways we can overcome the limits. That's communism, implicit communism. Okay.
That's wondering whether we have to figure out.
Oh no. Okay, maybe I should fix that. Maybe it's too late. But anyway. Anyone else? Just tell us what you're doing. What's the topic? You already said that, but anyway. Any progress so far? You want to say something?
There's something like two revolution days.
No, don't worry about that.
I'm just looking at eco-socialism. So, it sort of seems to break it down between sort of the biological aspect of what it is to use less on the earth for very much, I guess you'd say material contributions of it, but also and then there's sort of the human aspect of what it is to live in the world where we want to reduce not only for the sake of the human condition, but also.
Yes, yeah.
Well, Bayer's sort of Bayer, how would you say this?
How's that?
There, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, he's sort of just, I haven't finished it, but sort of just talking about using less and being mindful of others, but he seems to go a lot into, I guess you would say sort of that, well, he's referencing like the political left a lot, so sort of more like that idea of public ownership and communal bit. So, I don't really have any criticisms of that. I don't know how well that's going to work once it, because I think getting people on board, especially he references the US a lot, and that's very hard thing to do to get people to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and have you seen the Raptors handbook of ecosystem? That has a lot of chapters, and I guess some chapters might also pick up on the limitations, and that give you some materials for being a little bit more critical, or address the limitations, or maybe even the feasibility, how feasible is it, or what ways it can be implemented in most of the cases. That's the biggest limitation for any alternative that wants to challenge capitalism and has expanded, for centuries or lack of support. Okay. How about you? Just asking.
I'm taking people.
Okay.
It's quite interesting. Just looking through and trying to get them started.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you so much. A lot of interest in degrowth. Yes. Yes, it's about answering all six elements. Yes. Mentioning them. Yeah, you can, or it could be implicitly embedded, when you say, look at those examples. You can say in terms of the principles, very explicitly, here are the principles of whatever you call it. Also, degrowth. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. What is it? Thank you, sir. And bring up what is it? Okay. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions, any issues, and you said everybody did it, right? Okay. You're happy? No? Oh, Marxist limits.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're fine with the ordinance? You're the first one writing such thing in my course.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's because it's mostly theoretical.
okay,
I've been reading that and about neoliberal feminism, because you know it's to it and liberalism and Marcus feminism, that's it,
Hmm,
and how it's used and
okay, okay. Maybe examples, historical examples of
um there's been
the
one,
role of feminism in Marxism.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they've been how it's feminism is they're not we call it they call it revolutionizing the revolution as they
yes,
call it.
yes, yes.
That's what I've been that's
Hmm. Yeah, maybe some historical examples. Good, good. Okay.
Oh, just a question on the when do you think we'll have the annotated bibliographies marked so we can engage them with going with
Oh, yes, I almost forgot to say that. Don't wait until the feedback comes. Just continue the job because you already worked up yourself.
okay.
And if you have already checked your two sources with me, and I have said they're okay, so you should be okay with the essay. When the feedback comes, it will definitely be hopefully very useful to do as well.
Okay.
But please do not wait until the feedback. Amanda is working hard to make sure that you receive your feedback as soon as possible, especially with papers who have already submitted, they are being marked by Amanda. And then I will review, and then we'll release them. But then the week niners, we're getting a little bit too close, and I'm also stressed. Yes, yes, so, but do not wait until the feedback comes, just continue the job. If your two sources are okay, you should be okay to do the essay. Then the feedback comes that would be, as Americans say, the cherry on the top of the cake, something like that. Is that what you said?
Hopefully,
Yeah.
just say the cherry on.
Oh, cherry on the top, okay. Yeah, I remember I had a conversation, that was 2016, I was in Austria. And it was the election time, and I was at a conference, and an American colleague specialized in sociology of health. And I was just shivering because Trump was versus Hillary Clinton, and I said, "What do you think? Well, what do you think of Trump? Do you think he was going to win?" And he said, "No way, Americans will never vote for Southern charity."
Yeah.
And then he said, "But I said, what you guys got rid of Bernie Sanders? We could have been a much better, competitor versus Trump." And I'm not sure about Hillary Clinton. She seemed to be, and her husband not to be very much, favored by many. He said no. Yes, Bernie Sanders couldn't make it to the top. He was but anyway, we couldn't make it to the top, but now he's endorsing and supporting Hillary Clinton. He's the cherry on the top. And I said, well, I hope that cherry stays on the top. I'm not sure about that. And that happened in 2016. Surprised everybody. I had another American friend who was helping me with another, and then he moved to the US, and he was a statistician like me, following the polls very closely. And I was writing to him, what do you think? What are the polls are saying? And I said, no, don't worry, you got 5% Hillary is ahead. Okay, if you say so. Anyway.
You got sick.
Yeah. Okay. We don't have time to watch something. Maybe. That would be taking. Okay, Jack, do you have anything to say about your work?
No, I think you did a pretty good job of covering everything I had to ask questions about.
How do you reference in the IGSA, the reference,
That there was Harry's.
Sorry.
how do we reference what, reference the sources? IGSA.
You mean the style, it could be APA, it could be Harvard, as far as it's a standard and you stay consistent, it's okay. You know, whatever style you want to choose. Okay, we reference the text inside the text and also the list of resources. Again, look at those published examples that should be.
Chair until Harry made himself a website, never came back.
My exam season is coming up with lots of deadlines. It helps me save so much time. Grammarly has a
This episode was made in collaboration.
Okay, how many minutes this one has? 18 minutes. How many minutes we have? Not too bad. Maybe we can have a short discussion after that. Okay, this is not about any alternative. This is about automation, the future of automation in two different contexts. But let's see if we can reflect on it using the lens of the alternative that we have already adopted. And if you think the presenter is missing something or not, okay, or if you agree with something, or what are the interesting things that he says. But this is about automation, the future under automation, and he also tries to make a case for UBI or refers to some cases for UBI as this kind of a solution under automation. When we are under automation, many of us becoming jobless. But again, he's critical of that, and then he moves forward. Let's see.
With One Dime. Be sure to check out their video, Planet of the Robots, after this. 10 years from now, you could lose your job to a robot. In all likelihood, a robot that does your job better than you ever could. It's inevitable that, over time, more and more jobs can and will be replaced by automation and a variety of labor-saving technologies. And while the exact number is up for debate, a major study by Oxford University estimates that nearly half of current US jobs are likely to be automated or computerized with our current technological trends. Already, we see robots and artificial intelligence driving our cars, taking over the farming industry, writing entire news articles, and even diagnosing and treating medical patients. In grocery stores and McDonald's, low-wage jobs have been replaced by customer-facing robots and touchscreens. Depending on how we respond to this trend, our possible futures can look very different. In this episode, we're looking at what we can expect from this future automation. Or rather, what we can expect in the very different possible futures of automation based on the decisions we make to fully take advantage of our society's rapid technological innovation. For simplicity's sake, we'll restrict our analysis to two scenarios: a high degree of automation under a capitalist economy, and a similar degree of automation under a socialist economy. But first, let's start with a history of automation in general. If you're willing to go back far enough, humanity's evolution has always been directly related to our ability to mechanize and improve upon our physical abilities with tools. Our bodies and societies have progressed alongside and as a direct result of our ability to create objects that make our lives easier, that allow us to produce and consume more efficiently and in greater quantities. At first, it was simple handheld tools made of stone, then crude metals, until eventually we started truly automating basic tasks by powering the first primitive machines with flowing water, steam, and finally, fossil fuels. We continued innovating, creating ever more complex instruments, until they moved beyond completing simple tasks and started dealing with abstract concepts, the same way our brains can. Very quickly, we get to something like proper automation, machines doing things on their own. Specifically, we get to automation under our current economic model, capitalism. Since the origins of modern capitalism coincide roughly with the beginning of industrialization in Britain, that's where we'll start. At its birth, industrialization radically changed many things. The new machines of the industrial era were nothing like the tools that had dominated the history of humanity. They were bigger, more complex, and they needed several people with very particular roles just to function properly. They could produce like no human ever could, and with ever-decreasing levels of human involvement. Right away, this made a massive difference in the working arrangements of most people. From individual shops and farms, industrial machines and factories brought hundreds away from their personal businesses under a single factory roof in increasingly densely populated cities. Supervised by a growing but tightly guarded class of wealthy individuals, workers from neighboring regions were brought into factories, where they no longer had control over the process of production. Their roles became specialized, repetitive, and dull. Work for a wage became compulsory for more and more of the population as the concept of poverty became legally tangible. Capitalism had begun, and at its core were the new machines. With this new social model came new relationships and interest groups, the owner class and the working class, those who owned the factories and the machinery, and those who sold their time and energy to them. While this is going on, machines are growing in their power. They do more, produce more, and take up an ever greater chunk of the responsibilities of workers. And this starts creating problems. Some of the first observers of this era, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, were quick to realize the impact that the ever more capable steam-powered machines would have on this new labor force. They saw, of course, the slums and depths of poverty that these industrial towns had created. But more than that, they saw a new form of power emerge. Automation subjected workers to invisible pressures within the workplace when, as production processes became more automated, human workers had to adapt to the pace set by machines, a pace determined by the capitalists who manufactured and implemented them. Unsurprisingly, this feature of automation hasn't disappeared under more advanced stages of capitalism. Take Amazon warehouses, where workers who are entirely reliant on now fully automated systems have to adapt their working speed to the inhumane rate of maximally optimized robots. Workers lose their independence and their very humanity when they have to complete tasks in 11 seconds or less and take no breaks. Otherwise, they threaten to disrupt a long production chain of which they are only a minor part. Automation breeds its own forms of surveillance, and by that token, its own discipline. The consequences are not just a loss of independence, but also a profound feeling of alienation, personal anguish, and the all-too-common injuries at a full 10 per 100 workers in Amazon factories specifically. And that's not all. For Marx, this power was only one side of technological growth. Machines gave the capitalists much more. For starters, these machines made for a perfectly exploitable employee, and it's pretty obvious why. A machine demands no wages. It doesn't demand adequate working conditions, reasonable hours, or bathroom breaks. A machine costs what it costs to buy and maintain, and every single penny of its 24-hour workday afterwards goes back to the capitalist. It's a perfect arrangement. At least that's the way it seems. One Dime covers this aspect of automation extensively in his video. Of course, this arrangement has its own consequences. Suddenly faced with a new machine that performs better, cheaper, or faster, an entire workforce might be more easily undermined. In theory, its value plummets to the robot standards, allowing the owner class to threaten mass unemployment and eroding whatever resistance workers had created with their collective power. If the employee is not entirely replaced, their job either becomes more menial and alienating or more brutal and unprofitable. Workers are pitted against the machines they are now directly threatened by, rather than the capitalist class, which can shield itself behind the values of technological innovation. Today,
Amplify Premium Fuels, powering our way of life. Ampol, Australia's own.
this process is happening across all sectors of the economy. Factory jobs were of course the first to go, but they were soon followed by many service and white-collar jobs. As AI progresses, even highly specialized tasks are delegated to machines, taking with them jobs for which humans are no longer the cheapest option. And this poses a dilemma for workers. Asking for higher wages is both good and necessary, especially as living costs everywhere go up. But it puts them and their industries at greater risk of their labor being automated. You can't bargain when someone is holding all the chips. So, rather than settling for low wages out of fear of automation, we should embrace automation, demand higher wages, or perhaps some form of universal basic income, which will not only be necessary for workers, but may even be necessary for capitalism itself to function. But before we get to that, let's take automation under our capitalist system to its logical conclusion based on where we are today. Let's picture what the future of capitalist automation might look like. Technology, AI, and automation in general have improved to such a high degree that the only remaining jobs performed by humans are the few that can't be learned by an algorithm or performed by a set of pistons. The pace of change of new technologies will have gone too quickly to corral people into new job sectors, to the extent that these job sectors even exist. Robots do it all. In a capitalist society of widespread automation and computerization, three classes naturally emerge. At the top sit the rich and powerful, those who own the machines. Below them, those who still have non-computerized jobs and who will naturally be mainly providing services to the wealthy. And underneath them, the jobless masses, the majority of humanity. Things look pretty grim in this future. The first consequence is, predictably, extreme inequality. Under our current means-tested, insufficient, work-conditional methods of welfare distribution and the total absence of a cap to wealth accumulation, existing trends will only continue to drive larger and larger gaps between the rich and the poor. The effects of inequality we see today will only become more extreme, and with even less recourse to organized power. That leads to the second dramatic consequence of a highly automated capitalist society: corporate totalitarianism. A capitalist monopoly on robots virtually guarantees an even more dangerous monopoly on violence. If the ruling elite are no longer reliant on the working class to flourish, workers will be regarded as useless. And if they try to fight back for a better society that benefits the majority, the capitalist state and corporate elite can use their monopoly on technology to crush resistance in even more frightening ways. While today, interests between workers and capitalists are contradictory, a capitalist economy manufactures mutual dependence between the two groups. Workers depend on wages to live, and capitalists rely on workers to produce. Once that relationship is gone, suddenly an entire class of people becomes disposable. To quash the threat that an organized movement would pose to this new social order, the ruling class can either respond with totalitarian control or minimal concession. This would be the endgame of inequality. A tiny handful of godlike figures would have total control of this automated society, and everyone else would be left to die, detached from any possibility of scraping together a decent life. These are the dystopias of science fiction films like Blade Runner and The Hunger Games. Unfortunately, we are headed right for them if we don't fight for a post-capitalist future. While it is by no means a complete solution, widespread automation makes an urgent case for UBI, a universal basic income. If it becomes impossible to provide full employment for everyone, and wage labor is the only way to guarantee the money you need to live, a system that can no longer produce jobs but relies on people buying things to exist needs to find a way to make sure that happens. So people turn to UBI. And it's not an entirely unrealistic idea. If capitalist governments become desperate enough, they might even consider UBI out of necessity to ensure the short-term survival of capitalism. For one thing, UBI is pretty easy to implement. Unlike the means-tested welfare programs our politicians usually favor, any universal program that applies to everyone makes for an incredibly simple bureaucratic process. Everyone gets a monthly check, regardless of how much they make, whether or not they're employed, whether they're living alone or with others, eliminating any complex calculations on the government's or citizen side, or any of the ceiling problems you see with conditional welfare programs. Overall, this can bring some well-needed stability, and in a system where jobs are scarce but productivity is high, it's a fairly natural conclusion. There are tangible benefits. Unfortunately, that's about as far as UBI goes. UBI doesn't really guarantee you adequate living. Implemented from above by a capitalist government, a UBI is likely to look like our welfare programs today. Not very generous at best, and a Trojan horse to privatize the entire welfare state at worst. Regardless, concessions like UBI offer us the best-case scenario under capitalism. In the more likely worst-case scenario, elites would see no problem with relying on brutal, right-wing authoritarian forces. An increase in violence, in poverty, and in inequality would separate the haves from the have-nots. And as we've already seen when people resist these trends, there is little hesitation to meet them with military force. The masses would be left to die, and the elite would enjoy the benefits of their privatized gains. This is what extreme automation can look like under capitalism. It is disempowering for the many and inconceivably profitable for the few. At the top, those who benefited from millions of jobs being cut. At the bottom, everyone else. This will happen, because in many ways, it already is. But what does an alternate future, one under a socialist society, look like? The simple answer, much better, unless you're within the top 1% of the capitalist class. As a quick refresher, a socialist economy is one in which the means of production, meaning factories, machines, farms, and so on, are owned in common rather than by private individuals. This can vary quite a lot in practice, But the basic idea is that the economy is subject to democratic practice, not the whims of deeper pockets. In general, socialist economies are characterized by the provision of basic services to everyone. Food, water, shelter, and medicine for all are the greatest priorities of this economic model. Rather than profit,
reverse parking. That's a thing. That is not a thing. Finishing a flat pack? Thing. Marvs, for you who did that thing you did.
I need to get smarter with my money.
Talking finance? Be on it. News.com.au.
which often comes from gatekeeping these essential needs. In this kind of system, automation looks very different. While automation under any system can bring improvements in the quality of life for all, under a socialist economy, it does not do so at the expense of the security of the individual. You might lose your job to a more productive machine, but that won't suddenly throw you into your savings and threaten to kick you out of your home. Quite the contrary. In practice, this can mean any number of things. Where innovations in medicine or agriculture are developed, they are no longer held hostage by intellectual property patents so that only a few people can gain access and only for the highest prices. Vaccines and other life-saving innovations don't have to be life-saving and profitable to be worthwhile. They can just be life-saving. This is innovation under a very wide lens, but automation specifically works in just the same way. And the best way to prove that is to look at how automation affects work under a socialist economy. Whereas the capitalist exploits the advancements of technology to pit the workers against themselves, bringing down their wages, working conditions, or kicking them out of their job entirely, a socialist society has no such pressure to exert. Work being taken out of human hands is just that, no strings attached. Even if automation does not abolish all work, in capitalist or socialist economies alike, it will definitely reduce the amount of work we have to do. Whereas a capitalist system responds to this with unemployment, worsening working conditions, lower wages, or even meaningless jobs that only serve to increase profits without improving anything, a democratic organization of the economy can simply grant the worker more free time. Picture your average day at work when automation has all but taken over. With fewer responsibilities and fewer hours of human work needed, divided across more people whose jobs are also largely taken care of, a workday could be just a few hours long, if that. A work week just a few days. You could return home after a short day, knowing that your needs are taken care of, allowing you to spend your free time whichever way you like. More time means you can take up more hobbies, continue your education, or simply enjoy your life a whole lot more. You could take pleasure in activities that make you more fulfilled, or choose to spend your time working in your community, teaching classes, helping to plant trees, fixing potholes, whatever you want. In our current society, this kind of freedom is a luxury awarded only to the lucky few. Under its automated extreme, that same freedom is lost to meaningless work, to fatigue, and to desperately trying to stay afloat. In a system where your survival isn't directly tied to the hours you work, automation is a blessing, both for you and everyone else. Automation grants you more freedom rather than punishing you for simply existing in a society with scientific progress. It could allow us to move beyond our basic necessities and start climbing up our hierarchy of needs the world over, to start pursuing what really interests us in life, to take up educational, artistic, innovative, or creative pursuits that we would normally not be able to under capitalism without taking immense personal risks or being born into similarly immense privilege. The truth is, we've been waiting for this for decades. Back in the 1930s, economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that technological advancements would allow his grandkids' generation to only work for 15 hours a week, long before automation and artificial intelligence showed us the extent to which human labor could be replaced. The only reason we aren't there yet is the unnecessary capitalist obsession with always extracting more profit. But we can improve our lives without that suicidal greed. And so long as we continue to ignore that fact, our future is clear. This is an incredibly important and complex topic, and we've only just scratched the surface here. If you want a more in-depth look into the various possible futures that automation could bring, be sure to check out One Dime's video, Planet of the Robots, next. It's a fascinating look at one of the most precious.
Okay. So tell me what you think.
In retrospect.
Okay. So what do you think? think it was what did you find interesting or maybe this part behind when development.
Well, that thing now with AI taking a lot of very specialized jobs is that there's nothing there to support those who lose their jobs. It's that sort of thing of the, because they're trying to get the exact most amount, pay the least, getting jobs done and automating it, but they're leaving people without any safety nets or anything. So it's very seems very half thought out. But that's the whole thing. It's trying to get the most production and that paying.
So from the video, I got the sense that the person producing it was anti-capitalist. I think it would be interesting to see how people who are pro-capitalism that actually answer the question of what happens to capitalism in a post-scarcity, fully automated society. Like, do you think that do they think that we just create busy work? So like sort of almost we've got to uphold the sort of Protestant work ethic. Work is morally good, and so we have to keep people working and doing busy work so that they can prove their worth to society or something like that. I also did try to watch it with a bit of the lens of degrowth in mind. And I did know you mentioned towards the end, but one of the problems with capitalism in an automated society is the need to extract as much value, profit out of everything as possible. It's one of the reasons why I know some of the sources that I've read have said that proponents of degrowth don't see it as being incompatible with capitalism, but I don't think I agree with that. I think that it's like the idea of limiting growth to meeting our needs and living, making sure we meet basic human needs and then living within our resources is almost antithetical to the core capitalist and economic, neoliberal economic ideology, to a point where it doesn't they cease to function to maybe you could it would require a total reworking of capitalism to work under a degrowth. Would be worth in mind.
Yes. Okay.
There's a bit of a contradiction there with the neoliberalism and their emphasis on individual responsibility of extracting as much as possible from the resources. Wouldn't that be their responsibility of being not so not extracting extracting within the means. Isn't there a contradiction?
Yes.
They mentioned it in some of the things where itself, the idea of non-economic debts. So at the moment, because we're extracting more from the environment than it can replenish it, we're living in that they refer to that as environmental debt. Maybe that's going to that'll be paid by future generations.
Yeah, what he was saying that we can replace this fully automated capitalist dystopia with a fully automated communist or socialist utopia. Well, okay, using the degrowth lens, the issue of how much resources we can extract under each one of these, certainly we have the problem with the fully automated capitalist dystopia, or how about the other one as well? So we didn't see that lens of degrowth being used. I didn't see that. I guess I didn't feel that sensitivity. There are.
I feel like it was almost assumed.
Yes.
Assumed under socialism, but then people often point to the Soviet Union. I guess defenders of the Soviet Union would argue that it was because it was in competition with the sort of what neoliberal capital, like I guess neoliberalism wasn't a big thing until the very end, but because it was indirect, it had to defend itself and be in competition with capitalist liberal democracies. But it was forced to up in its production so that it could compete with them on an international scale. But there wasn't a big focus on environmentalism. Like the Soviet Union was very pro-industrializing.
Yes, you know, I remember from Rogers' argument that this is assuming that if we establish socialism, gender equality would be achieved. It is assumed that everything is fully automated and under control by the workers, by the societies. So the honoring the limitations of the Earth system is assumed. Right? It's assuming is highly problematic. You know, unless this is fully consciously implemented, included in the agenda, that would then we can say, okay, when we get there, we also make sure that this fully automated communist or socialist utopia is not going to to go beyond the bandwidths, beyond the limits. There will always be jobs that cannot be fully automated. Care work, affective work, right? Emotional relations. They cannot be replaced with the robots. Someone should do them. And again, is that again going to be overburdened? You know, women being overburdened by that. You know, how the non-automated jobs are going to be distributed, right? And again, you can also think of the non-human beings as deliverers of other benefits that cannot be fully automated. Yes, I mean, I think to assume that there other issues will be automatically addressed is a little bit problematic, isn't it? I don't know. Yes, please.
I think the one thing that is sort of it seemed that Robert was producing that film had sort of this idea of work and even like factory work as a very negative thing. But I think the one thing that sort of gets overlooked is like people who enjoy, like, and I'm not saying it's everybody because there's definitely that sort of sector of people who see like this is only a way of survival for them. You know, you see the other people who this is where they find their purpose and find their joy. But I think the other thing that you're losing when they're talking about taking everybody out of the factories and just having it automated is that, okay, you have time to spend on your hobbies and doing your own thing. That's a very individualized way of living. Because the people who I've talked to who've done those sorts of jobs, it's spending time with their work friends that gives them. So it's the job, it's also the people they do it with. And if you take that from the centralized working and you send everybody else out and say, do whatever makes you happy, but that's not, but it's just you. It's
we develop communities you know, association through work. Yes, that's a good point. And the point you made reminds me of another thing, which I actually picked up by Marx and Engels in the earlier stages. It is impossible to get to that fully automated society. Even, I mean, maybe at maximum 50%, 60%, but not beyond that. And there are some good reasons for that. Not only many jobs cannot be fully automated or even partially automated, but also those parts that those sections of the society that are automated make many people redundant under capitalism. And that redundancy, when it grows, it reduces the cost of labor. The labor becomes cheaper and cheaper because more and more people are put into the reserve army, as Marx says, the reserve army of the jobless. And therefore, if you have access to cheap labor, why should go for expensive technological innovation? So many sectors would not go for that because they have access to the cheap labor. There are also a number of other reasons why. Just a second. There's another number of reasons why it cannot actually get. So it's a little bit too far-fetched to think that automation is going to take over everything. Yes.
I don't like some of the pro capitals arguments would be like, I know Fordism and Milton Friedman,
Yes.
One of the reasons that they advocate for like reporting like the working class needs to give them money because what's the use of producing a product of the capital of producing a product if people don't have the money to buy it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I forgot.
Like
Yes.
the exchanging money.
Yes.
So it's like what's the dystopian point that he sort of used as his anti-capitalist argument. I just like people produce like it's almost like comic book supervillain. Well, like they don't deserve, we're just improving our own lives and living in extreme luxury. And like, yeah, we could easily improve other people's lives as well, but we're not going to because we don't want to for some reason.
A largely automated society would have many people jobless, and the jobless people don't have money to buy the things that the automation is producing.
At a certain point, doesn't it come cheap? It's like the upper class will employ those people versus upkeep on military robots to like stop them from obtaining resources illegally.
And another argument that Marx makes is under the title of the tendency of the rate of profit to decline, is that the more automation happens, the more mass production. The more mass production, that means more the value of the product declines. Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, thanks for being patient even beyond the past time, and I look forward to hearing from you about your work, and also I look forward to seeing you next week. All the best.